Hi guys, thank you for tuning in. Hope everybody enjoyed the wonderful long weekend. It feels like we haven't been on live. Well, it has been a week because we were on
It's been a
Thursday.
week, yeah.
Yeah, so it's been a week. So thank you for tuning in. Today we're back with another great topic that goes kind of like hand in hand with what we talked about last week was recruitment biases. Today we bring another strong topic and we want to talk about employee turnover. And the Rob, who commented on my post, and you said, spoiler alert. So yes, Rob, I joked and said, are you HR? So he was bang on what exactly we're going to talk about, the cost and, what is the cost? A lot of time when companies think of employee turnover cost, they just think of recruitment cost, but it's a lot more deeper than just hiring. It's a lot more. Both me and Gil have similar perspectives, different perspectives. So we're gonna have an open discussion about this. He has also another great resource, which is his dad, which I actually just recently came to know. It's David, who I'm connected to on LinkedIn. Had no clue that Gil and his dad David are both part of my connection. I think I'm connected to your dad longer than you.
Yes, I believe you are.
I believe you
are. He's been at it longer.
I'm going to get you to kick off the segment as always, but also because I know you have a strong resource, your dad, on the subject matter expert today that we're talking about. So let's dive right into employee turnover and how it's actually impacting. I want to highlight that this doesn't impact just larger organization. It doesn't matter the size of your organization. You can be a startup. You can be a small company, 20 employees, 30, 40, 50. It doesn't matter. It actually impacts all sizes of the organization pretty much equally the same way. So, Gil, let's dive right into how it impacts companies.
So I'm going to start with actually a better resource for numbers because my dad is an amazing resource for all things organizational behavior. But when it comes to numbers, there's even a better resource. We did work a number of years ago with StatsCan, and they provided us the numbers the research that they had provided. So I have to read through it here. But for an unskilled worker, an entry-level unskilled worker, turnover costs 1.5 times their salary. For a skilled independent contributor, 3 times their salary. For a middle manager, 4 to 6 times their salary. A senior manager, 5 to 7 times their salary. An executive, 8 to 10 times their salary. And a CEO is 10 times total compensation. 10 times, and that one in particular might be eye-opening for people, but when you start to realize that when a CEO leaves, they often bring their EA with them, they often bring an executive or two with them, so it's not just
the
them
entire team's leaving.
There's a lot of the team that's leaving as well. So those are the numbers that StatsCan did the research on. Those are the numbers they came up with. So I just want to start with that because everybody's always wondering the numbers. And if you look online, you see a lot of opinions, some more useful than others when it comes to what turnover costs. And a lot of times you'll see the cost of turnover and they'll base it down to whatever the hiring process is.
Exactly. Like a lot of people, a lot of researchers out there, in general, a lot of people don't do a deep dive into the overall cost, not just, okay, this person's left, and now we got to replace them, right? But let's break it down, right? Like when you're giving these great stats, research I looked into did more on the percentage side. Like on typically, it can cost you anywhere like about 150% of the person's ending salary. If their manager level, almost 200% of their ending compensation package or salary, and higher. Like, so as you go higher, the amount percentages increases. But we're going to now do the breakdown. It isn't just hiring. It's actually, as you pointed out in an executive situation, it's their EA, their team's leaving because they brought them and they're going to leave with them, right? Sometimes it's just not the CEO either. It can be a manager.
Absolutely.
Sales. Let's talk about sales. I think sales is even huge because it's not about their team leaving, customers leaving with the salesperson, because we all know this. And sometimes we just turn a blind eye when the salesperson's leaving. We all know this. We do business with people, right?
Absolutely.
If a company has sales account managers and sales reps who are going and getting the business, they're doing business with that sales rep. Yes, with your product, it's your products that are being sold or services, but it's the front liner, which is the sales rep that they sign on with. So in the sales team, you're looking at losing potentially even possibly your customers.
Yep.
Who
Absolutely.
they brought. They might just go with them, especially if they went to your competitor. No amount of contracts, I want to put it out there. I don't care what contract you make your people sign, sales agreement contracts, no compete, and all that stuff. It's not rocket to know where someone's gone, especially in today's days and age. It's called LinkedIn. You can see your salesperson's new job and that competitor who they're already connected with. They don't need to lure them and say, hey, come with me. If they love that person's service and how they dealt with their accounts, customer service they provided, then they can easily make that transition like that. So you can potentially lose your customers with them as well.
So I want to go back to Rob's comment on your post, because it was dead on. I mean, if you wanted to do a mathematical accounting of the things, some quantifiable, some not, that impact on the organization, it was an amazing hit list. And I wanted to start first with his first point, which was institutional knowledge. That when somebody leaves, the knowledge, so you talk about relationships. Absolutely, relationships are huge, but then the knowledge, what they know that hasn't put back into the organization, is tremendous. And especially if the person's been having a bad experience for some time, they haven't been making an effort to share their knowledge. They're going to more likely be in protection mode where they're not sharing that knowledge. The reality is that with any of these factors that we talk about, it depends on the role in the range to determine the range of impact, right? A person who's been with a company for 20 years and has worked their way up the ranks and worked in every part of the organization has more institutional knowledge, say, than a person who's only been working there 6 months or a year. Right. So we have to factor that in. Or like you point out, that a salesperson can bring a customer, or could possibly likely bring a customer with them, because the sale is personal and individual. As much as we call it B2B sales, it's really still person-to-person sales. We have to factor those things into account. That depending on the role, it's going to have a bigger, larger, smaller impact.
It's also, like Rob pointed out, let's dive even deeper. When that person is leaving, right? Maybe they give notice, or whatever the case is, the employees left. Now, the time, okay, so they left, they're taking their knowledge with them, right? So, and I'm going to give HR perspective here, and then I'm pretty sure a lot of HR recruiters who've done recruitment, 2 weeks is not sufficient time to find a replacement for the person that's leaving and have that person train and pass on the knowledge to the new hire. I've been into multiple situations where the individual's already left and we're still trying to recruit for the replacement, or we barely made it, but then that person's already left, or there's maybe 1 day overlap, right? So typically, like, you give 2 weeks notice. So when that person leaves and you're still trying to find a replacement, it's loss of productivity. That person's gone. Who's now doing their job, right? So the loss of productivity gets counted into the turnover rate. Hence why the researchers are saying it's 4 times or the one I looked at, it was saying, I forgot the source name, but pretty concrete, 150%. That's how they break it down. That it's not just hiring, it's the loss of productivity, loss, as you said, loss of knowledge, right? It's the time it's going to take the new hire to get to the level that the existing employee was at. So the integration phase to get them to the level that they were at also within your organization. Loss of morale. The employees that are left behind had a close bond with the employee, so that I like to call it the little grieving stage. So the loss of the employee leaving, and so their department's a little bit changed. So those factors as well, right? Then it's the onboarding cost, it's the training cost. So all that is cost, right? And then, so that's all cost that a lot of people are overlooking when they're looking at the cost for turnover, and majority of people just focus on the recruitment. But I feel like even the recruitment, I don't think a lot of people are focused on the right numbers here, because it takes from the beginning of the process to like putting the job description together, how many hours are you spending to do that, how many hours you're having to put the onboarding process together, the training together, the interview process together, and how many people are going to be interviewing, not to mention how many interviews you've done as an HR recruiter, and then the hiring manager's cost, right? Their time cost. You got to do the cost by the person's time, everybody's time, and their hourly rate. You got to do those calculations. So the cost is from, as you said, the numbers you looked at, the numbers I looked at, I agree to those costs. It is pretty high if we actually look at it at a bigger scope and in a bigger picture. Yeah, those numbers actually really make sense that the cost is that high.
I want to absolutely, and that's what always surprises me, and why when I see low numbers online, and why I said that some of these quantifications are not worth as much as others. But I want to hit on something that you talked about, which was around morale after somebody leaving. And Rob, again, in his post, spoiler alerts, talked about the strain when a person leaves, because there's multiple different kinds of strain, right? Because there's the strain of having to pick up that person's workload, of having to cover for that person, because now you're down one person on a team that used to cover a certain workload. So there's that aspect. And then there's also the differences factor of why did the person leave? That becomes an important question in terms of morale when a person leaves. If a person leaves and everybody knows they left because our manager is terrible, well, then it just defeats everybody else, because there's one person who used to be in it with me who's no longer here anymore. And the reason they left is because it sucks here, right? Whereas if a person leaves, that we've seen it plenty of times in even good organizations, somebody just has a great opportunity. And they're doing it because, you know what, they developed in this role, the organization gave them the opportunity to develop, and they found something new. And some people are excited for them. And it has a different impact on morale, the reasons for leaving, which then really ties into my next point, which for me is always so important, because quantifying these things and looking at these numbers are great for sort of demonstrate that there's a platform that's burning. But for me to actually put that fire out, you need to know where the fire is coming from. That for me is one of the biggest factors in when it comes to turnover, is that not all turnover is created equal, and not all turnover is coming from the same place. We have employee experience is so complex, and we are all so diverse that there are different reasons why we leave. And so if the organization is wise about their turnover, they should be collecting feedback and understanding what are the risk factors, why are people actually leaving. And I'm sorry to say, but exit surveys are not the solution, because most people I've ever spoken to have said they're not exactly honest and forthcoming when it comes to an exit survey.
You know what? I think I have to correct you there for a second. I think it depends who's doing it.
Absolutely. It does depend who's doing it.
But I agree with you that the exit interview, I've used them. And I agree with you that it's not the effective method if you want to sustain an engaging workforce, because that person's leaving and now you do an exit interview, but then it's kind of like the too late kind of thing, something you're doing that's kind of too late to do. But still, I found it in my situation, I still found it effective to make a change, right? I think it's also who's doing it and how you're taking that feedback. But I want to highlight that exit interviews, minus exit interviews, in good or bad, the big one thing that I see every time I work with a client, like the first thing I do, I never take my client's word for, we don't have turnover, we have a great workforce. I always run a turnover rate report, because that's my first method. I'm working with a client, first thing I can do, I'm going to run a turnover rate report. Why? That gives me a clear image of the company, their culture, everything. If your employee turnover rate is high, we got problems. And it amazes me how many companies, and I only work with smaller, medium-sized companies, and the sizes are like 100 plus and so on. They're not aware. They're actually not aware because no one's looked at the numbers. I've seen people get shocked when I say, well, I ran your numbers and your turnover rate's this, which equals to, well, let me dive deeper. And well, this is how many people are leaving. And it's always like, you're just replacing them. And they're like, what? It's just, I guess, because smaller organizations are wearing multiple hats and everybody's running around and doing multiple things. And I guess this piece is a little bit like overlooked, that this person left, and it's maybe, okay, they got a better opportunity kind of thing, and maybe nobody paid attention, and no one's paying attention to, well, wait, hold on, why are people leaving? Better opportunities all the time. So I think I agree with you, the exit interview is pretty much like too late kind of thing to do.
I've known a lot of people who are more than a little bit insulted when they get asked, what could we have done differently? So you'll change it after I've left? You put me through misery, or you ignored my suggestions for so long? But really the heart of the point, though, isn't so much that exit interviews and to trash them or anything, but more that there are better ways to find the information you need to know why people are considering leaving or staying. I know a lot of smart organizations who are conducting stay interviews that are talking to their people and understanding, why is it you stay here? What is it that motivates you to keep you here, and accentuating the positive instead of eliminating the negative? Or in those conversations, finding out, what are the problems here? What are the risks? Because without the voice of the employee in all of this, you're just getting numbers. All you're going to be stuck with are just the numbers on the page, and the numbers aren't on the page are only going to tell you so much about the why of employee turnover. They might find, you might find some really interesting facts. One of the things that I've always suggested to organizations when looking for turnover is looking through groups of organizations, and not just for managers, but second step managers, because oftentimes it's not just the one manager that's the issue, but it's their manager that's causing a group of managers or supervisors to be a problem. But and the numbers can tell you certain things, but they can't tell you exactly what people are thinking. They can't tell you why people want to leave.
No, you got to go to the source.
Yeah, and you need to have earned that trust to get that kind of quality information. You need people to tell you honestly.
Yeah, you know what? It's funny because you're right. Who's the worst people to go get feedback? Managers, HR. No one's going to openly talk to you. And I'm HR. So before anybody's like, no, how we're not. No, we're like, it depends on the image you have. You're still not the best person. What I do for my clients who have high turnover rate is I actually roll out a company culture champion committee. So it's like having a committee, but you point people that want to be part of this committee. So they're going to be the voice of their area. It can be a department, but it can't be managers. It's got to be the employee become the voice and the go-to person in that department to say, okay, well, collect the information, and then you meet once a week. If you have like I did this for one client, they had a very toxic work environment, huge turnover, and the only fastest way for me to turn things around quickly was to implement this culture committee. Mm-hmm. It's not my idea. I actually got the idea from one of my friends' company. They had it, and I kind of got her to walk me through what they did. So I used that same thing that they implemented in their company, tweaked it to this company in order to, because it was so toxic, in order to move things really fast, I had to meet with the committee once a week. But I was running the committee, facilitating it, but I was not the source to go and ask employees. I made their peers be the voice. So, and anytime we like, okay, first, obviously, let's go find out what's going on, like what are employees feeling and so on. If we wanted to make, basically, I've implemented these committees in a lot of my clients' organizations, and they go really, really well. And it becomes where before do anything, you go to the committee and say, hey, we're looking to make this change. Feel it out. Go have discussions with your peers, your departments, get the feeling of what employees are thinking. So it kind of becomes like a decision-making group that it's like a focus group. They'll go pass on the information, collect the information. There's no surveys. I hate surveys. No surveys needed. You're getting real time, real information on the spot like this, and you can take action like this. Instead, a lot of companies are doing gimmicks. I call them gimmicks. Surveys, employee surveys, once a year survey. But yet, who got time to wait for once a year survey? When if you have a horrible culture where your employees are constantly leaving, you're gonna wait for a year to do a survey just to find out that you got shit culture. Pardon my language. But then what? What do you do with that data?
And what kind of quality data is it, right? In a survey, that if you have people that don't trust you, a survey written of questions because some consultant told you those are the best questions to ask, or some organization psychologist told you those are the best questions to ask, and you have a bunch of people who don't trust you. I really like the idea, and I've heard of this idea before about culture champions or talent champions, and I really appreciate it because it shows a recognition that for the average employee population, there are different levels of trust. And looking up in the organization, you don't generally trust those above you in the organization. You don't trust your manager. You don't trust leadership. Depending on the organization, you will trust your peers. You won't trust HR because the position HR will have been put in the organization is not one of support or helping people in far too many organizations.
I'm laughing.
Because it's true.
Like, no, I agree. You know why I'm laughing when you said because people don't trust HR. It's true. I'm not gonna sit here and say how, because every company I worked in before I started my own consulting business, that's the first thing I had to do. Damage control, revamp the image, the rebranding of, now everybody talks about branding. I've been doing it since 2006. So, but then that wasn't a buzzword, right? I should be using these buzzwords. But that's the first thing I had to do. I had to change the image because when I went on the floor, people will look at me like, why is she on the floor? I was like, why? Why not? Well, HR doesn't come on the floor. I'm like, well, this one does. God, well, I do, right? But I had a great boss that showed me how important it is to be on the floor every day. Show them you're there. Listen, hear the problems, solve the problems on the floor. You can't do it behind sitting by a fancy desk. So I had a great mentor, which was a great boss who really built my HR career. And that's the first thing I did after when I saw him do it, I started doing it, and that's what I did in my 14 plus 15 years. Even now, when I go to client side, I go on the floor, I talk to people. You can solve problems like this, and that's always been the feedback that I'm not a traditional HR person. We're scared to go to the HR because, well, you're only going to the HR if you're in trouble. Like, I've heard this in my entire HR career, that you only go to HR when you're in trouble and you're getting fired. And I was like, no, that's not
the brand. That's the perception. But then to tie it all back to your culture committee, and what I'm talking about is that when it comes to turnover, the only way to stem the tide is by finding out the problems.
Yeah.
The only way to find out the problems is give your employees a voice. However it may be, whatever is right for your organization. And Gurpreet has given us an amazing example that a lot of organizations would do well to implement. That if you find that voice, you will be able to know what people care about. You will be able to know how to address those problems, and then you will be able to demonstrate to people that you're addressing them. Because that's always they're the flip side of giving the voice to employees, is you need to do something about it. I always say
they will also tell you, well, this is what we want, right? They'll also give you a solution. So your work is kind of like, cut out.
But they have to do something. And one of the problems is that sometimes I've seen organizations give the voice and then do nothing about it. They always need to have you said, we did. Because you told us this was an issue, we changed something. We heard your problem. We gave you a voice, and then next time people are more likely to share information. Yeah. Whereas if you don't change anything, and they now know there's a problem, well, they're not telling you anything next time. And all of this important information about problems and issues and opportunities, which lies with the employee population, will never be heard.
Also, what the interesting thing is when you implement something like this and you're getting real time data, I call it data, it's information, you're getting real time, right? The biggest thing I noticed, especially with a lot of companies, one feedback was constant. You'll be amazed at how many employees don't want company events outside of the office time. So a lot of times in our heads, when we're planning, let's say, I'm going to be honest here, like when you plan events, right? We always look at, okay, well, like, what can we do? Oh, okay, maybe a soccer club, or let's do a soccer game, or on this weekend, let's do this, or this time. So it's a lot of the events, social events are happening outside of the office time. Let's say if your company works 9 to 5. So when I rolled the culture committee at this one company, that was the number one feedback right away given was, well, we don't want events outside of our company time. Why should we be doing something when it's our free time, right? If you want to do events for us, then it needs to be on our time.
Yeah.
Our time at your office, right? Not when we go home and then we go home and then we got to drive back because X, right? So then we quickly removed all events. And what's the point of doing events if your employees don't want it, right? Like, and they're not going to show up. You pay money to get all these, like, depending on what you're doing, you're paying money, right? So we removed it and started doing events on premise during the office time, right? So it's a really healthy way to get real-time information to fix the problems, also to do what your employees want. A lot of times I've seen people, managers or executive team, they're doing what they think the employee wants. without having any dialogue to confirm, is this what they want? Or is this what you want? There's a difference between
create a
what you
narrative
want.
in their own head. They create a
Yeah,
narrative in their own
and what
head,
you
and then they make decisions
actually
based on
want.
that. Yeah, and that is a
And
creator turnover right there. And so all of these things, all of these costs that we've talked about in terms of other people's times, ramp up time, building relationships, emotional, mental costs, stress costs, you know, whether it's recruiter costs. Sometimes organizations have to deal with recruiter costs, whatever it is, these can all be minimized by creating the experience and creating the environment that people are looking for, that will help them thrive, as opposed to just whatever leadership, the narrative they have in their head, they think it's expedient, they make decisions, as opposed to understanding, okay, what's the impact on our people and how can we make a decision that serves both the people and the business.
Also, I want to highlight, I know we're going a little over now, but one thing we didn't touch on was wage. If you're going to pay low, yeah, you're going to have high turnover. Somebody will take a job with you for survival purposes until they get a better one and they'll leave. I've seen this happen. Again, I work with smaller organizations, so I've seen this happen a lot with smaller organization, and they don't realize the greater impacts happening with you paying low, but then these people keep leaving, right? And also, well, maybe you hired 3 people to do one person's job, not one person's job, but you hire 3 people and thinking you're saving money because let's say you hire them for $50K, but maybe you can hire one exceller, pay them, say $100K, you save $50K because now you took away one. You took away 3 people, but gave them one salary, but they're outperforming all 3 put together, right? So cost, and like a lot of people don't understand the value that you're getting in return. So I also want to highlight the other big factor that I've seen working with smaller, medium-sized company is not paying properly. That will drive your turnover. Guess what? People are not dumb. If you're going to underpay people, they're only going to take it until they get a better opportunity. Just how this individual wrote a comment on my comment on someone else's post, there's enough people to do the job. You saw that I tagged you in the comment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That anyone can do this job. There's more than enough. So, that type of attitude will always get you in trouble with turnover, thinking that there's enough people out there that will take this job, right? And then lowballing. I've seen immigrants get lowballed a lot. And new grads, I've seen people, new grads get taken advantage of, or overall any companies just think, well, I can only pay this, right? No problem. If you can only pay X amount, then bring the position down, right? Don't look for 10 plus years of experience. So salary compositions have to be aligned with the role you want to hire for. And if your budget doesn't allow it, you need to then
lower your expectations
to match your budget. Exactly.
Lower your expectations. And because it's all about expectation versus what the market can provide. And if somebody knows they feel like they've been underpaid from the beginning, they're not going to give you inspired work. They're not going to be excited about the work that they do. They're, like you said, looking elsewhere.
You know what? All it does is it creates a negative image in the employee's mind. It creates toxic work environment in the sense that everybody talks. If companies think no one talks about salary, no matter what agreement you get people to sign confidential salary, it's not confidential. People will talk, right? And it shouldn't be. That's why Unfortunately, it's been put on hold, but that's why I love the new law that was coming out. But then Ford government came in and they put a pause on it, been on hold, was the pay equity, transparency. You had to post the salary on the job posting. I forgot what the bill was called, but then government Ford came in and then he put a pause on it. So you had to actually, if you were going to hire, you had to disclose. In Ontario, the law was going to be that you have to disclose the salary range. You cannot not post a job and advertise a job without the salary. Plus, you were going to be allowed to ask for salary information from candidates, but that's been put on hold. But that would have been one amazing. Oh, I lost Gail. That would have been a one amazing bill if it comes to light, being transparent. So I'm going to end today's session on employee turnover. I lost my partner in crime, Gail. I guess we've been having some internet issues. So employee turnover, to sum it up, it is a cost. It's a very expensive cost to you as the owner of a business, organizations, everybody involved. It's a huge cost. As Gail pointed out with stats numbers, it can cost anywhere from, depending on the position, 4 times to all the way to 10, 20 times of the compensation package of the person who's left the organization. Multiple factors, as we explained, go into this: loss of productivity, training, onboarding, employee morale, loss of knowledge, and then hiring their replacement, onboarding them, training them. It's a huge cost, right? So to avoid this cost, there's multiple things you can do. And one is you can, as I mentioned, you can implement a company culture committee. Actually not company culture, you can just be called culture committee. It's a way to get fast, real information. It's like a focus group, but you also have individuals that are now the leaders or champion of the voice in their department and so on. So if you need further help with company culture, employee turnover, reach out to myself or Gil. We'll be more than happy to help you in any way possible. So tune in next Monday. We'll be back on Monday at 12:30, same time, 12:30 p.m. Eastern time, with another great topic. And if there's a topic you want us to cover, please feel free to reach out to myself or Gail, and we will be more than happy to cover the topic for you on a live segment. So this is GNG LinkedIn live segment, and we will see you Monday. Until then, enjoy the weekend. And if you live in Toronto, we're going to have some amazing, great weather. It's about time. So tune in on Monday and see you guys. Thank you. Bye.